Okay, welcome everybody. Very happy to see everyone here. And a little later, I'll properly introduce our speaker, which will be Ms. Zora Ali, speaking about the spirit of Ramadan. Okay, welcome everybody. Very happy to see everyone here. And a little later. Yeah, I was getting some feedback. All right. I would just like to invite Zora to acknowledge country, and then we'll start with the devotional program.
Thanks, Colin. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners and custodians of the land on which I live, the people of the Darug Nation, and pay my respects to their elders, past and present, as well as to emerging leaders. I extend that respect to any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders who may be with us or may be listening to this podcast. Thank you.
Thank you, Zora.
Ba-da-ba-ba, 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 ba-da-ba-ba. Pass by whatever exists in this world and find me. Find me. Pass by whatever exists in this world and find me. Find me. I am the sun of perception, the ocean of science. I revive the withered ones and quicken the dead. I am that light which illumines the path of insight. I am the falcon on the hand of the Almighty. I bear healing in my wings and teach the knowledge soaring. I bear healing in my wings and teach the knowledge of soaring to the heaven of truth. Pass by whatever exists in this world and find me. Find me. Pass by whatever exists in this world and
Eden Jung, can you read, please? Meditation is greater than thought. The earth seems to meditate. Atmosphere and sky seem to meditate. The waters and the mountains seem to meditate. It's do gods and men. Why small men are quarrelsome, slanderous gossips, the grave may be said to have received their due portion of the fruits of meditation. Review meditation. Hindu writings, Chandogya Upanishad.
O Ahura, Mazda, and Asher, bestow upon them, Zoroastra and his followers, spiritual strength and power. O Vahuman, grant mental power, cleverness, and full wisdom to Zoroastra, so that he may lead the world to peace and rest. O Mazda, we all recognize him as thy noblest son and best of creation, and accept him as our best leader. Zoroastrian Writings, Garthus, Yasna 29, verse 10.
Meditation brings wisdom. Lack of meditation is folly. These are the two roads, one leading forward, one backwards. Choose the right one, the one that leads to wisdom. Buddhist writings, the Dharmapada.
Happy is the man that has not walked in the counsel of the wicked, nor stood in the way of sinners, nor sat in the seat of scornful. But his delight is in the law of the Lord, and his law doth he meditate day and night. And he shall be like a tree planted by the streams of water, that bringeth forth its fruits in its season, and whose leaf doth wither, and in whatsoever he doeth, he shall prosper. Jewish writings.
And he said, whereunto shall we liken the kingdom of God? Or with what comparison shall we compare it? It is like a grain of mustard seed, which, when it is sown in the earth, is less than all the seeds that be in the earth. But when it is sown, it groweth up, and becometh greater than all herbs, and shooteth out great branches, so that the fowls of the air may lodge under the shadow of it. Christian writings, Mark chapter 4, 30 to 32.
A blessed book have we sent down to thee, that men may meditate its verses, and that those endued with understanding may bear it in mind. Islamic writings, Quran, Surah 38, verse 28. Each hath a succession of angels before him, and behind him, who watch over him by God's behest. Verily, God will not change his gifts to men till they change what is in themselves. Islamic writings, Quran, Surah 13, verse 12.
I think he has dropped out. Tracy, can you read, please?
Meditate profoundly, that the secret of things unseen may be revealed unto you, that you may inhale the sweetness of a spiritual and imperishable fragrance, and that you may acknowledge the truth that from time immemorial, even unto eternity, the Almighty hath tried and will continue to try his servants, so that light may be distinguished from darkness, truth from falsehood, right from wrong, guidance from error, happiness from misery, and roses from thorns. Baha'i writings, Bahola, Kitabikuan, Quran.
Green fields and golden sands are all I need, are all I want. Let the wind blow hard, I don't mind. A small house and an olive tree to keep and feed my family. Let the wind blow hard, I don't mind. One day we'll all realize I'm not the only one. Just raise your eyes up and you'll be gone. To those green fields and golden sands, that's all I need, that's all I want, that's all I really need. Let the wind blow hard, I don't mind. One day we'll all realize I'm not the only one. Just raise your eyes up and you'll be gone. To those green fields and golden sands, that's all I need, that's all I want, that's all I need, that's all I really want.
Thank you very much to the readers. And welcome again to everybody. And now I very much appreciate our speaker to come, and would like to welcome Zora Ali. Zora is a pharmacist and a writer. She is a trustee at her local mosque, Imam Hassan Center in Annan Grove, and actively involved in their Saturday religious school. Zora is a member of interfaith groups such as the Women's Interfaith Network and Religions for Peace. She has organized several interfaith meetings at her mosque, Imam Hassan Center, and volunteered for several years with Together for Humanity, which fosters school students' interfaith and intercultural understanding. And Zora will be talking about Spirit of Ramadan. So over to you, Zora.
Thanks, Colin, and thank you everyone for being here. Thanks, Vasanta, for inviting me to speak tonight. So I thought I would talk about the Spirit of Ramadan as it has just finished. I think it's just been under 2 weeks since we completed the month of Ramadan, and I might just begin by giving a little bit of an overview of what fasting is, because there might be things that you know, and if you do, forgive me for repeating them, but I thought I might just sort of go through a bit of that before I sort of talk about the spirit or what it represents for me. So Ramadan is the 9th month in the Islamic calendar. The Islamic calendar follows the lunar lunar cycles as opposed to the solar cycles. It's the lunar months are usually 29 or 30 days. So for that month of Ramadan, Muslims fast during the daylight hours. So we begin our fast from dawn. We normally get up before dawn, maybe an hour or maybe just a very short period of time before, and have what you would call a breakfast, I guess. For some people, that might be, you know, a cup of tea or milk with some dates and, you know, maybe some toast or cereal or egg. For some people, it could be a larger meal. And then from dawn till sunset, we don't eat or drink anything. That is that's what the fast requires. So in the Quran, Allah says, and I'm quoting from the 2nd chapter, verse 183, "O you who believe, fasting has been prescribed for you as it had been prescribed for those who came before you, so that you may guard yourself against displeasing Allah." So it's meant for all Muslims who are physically fit and mature. You know, they have to be old enough to fast, and they have to be physically capable of fasting. Hence, the very young and the very old, or the sick, or the pregnant, or breastfeeding mothers have all been exempted from the fast. For those who can, we abstain from food, drink, smoking, and sexual activity. And this continues for that whole month of Ramadan, as I explained. In Arabic, the word Ramadan comes from the word ramad, which means to burn, literally. So when I was growing up, you know, the way I understood the month of Ramadan was that it was a month of blessings from and mercy from God, a month when all the doors of heavens were open. If you obeyed Allah and you fasted for His pleasure, then, you know, you would be showered with His mercy and blessings. And it was also a time when you could burn your sins and renew yourself, in a sense. It was also explained to me growing up that the month of Ramadan, apart from you know, making you know, apart from a time where we come closer to God by obeying Him physically by the fast, it's by no means just a physical fast. It's not abstinence only of food and drink and your physical desires. It's also a time where you learn to control yourself emotionally and mentally, and where you abstain from other deeds which are seen as you know, sins to community or towards other people. For example, if you have a temper, then in Ramadan it's important that you control your temper. If you are prone to using bad language, or if you are prone to backbiting, talking about other people or hurting people through the way you speak, then in Ramadan it's very important that you use this time to practice abstaining from these things, in the hope that you are going to be able to learn some discipline and emerge at the other end of the month a better person, you know, in terms of the way you behave, not just abstinence from food or physical pleasures. I think, you know, I think if we are able to, and I feel that one of the big lessons of the month was that if I was able to abstain from the things that Allah had allowed me to eat and drink normally, for example, to stay away from foods which I can eat and drink normally, then it builds this willpower in me to be able to say no to the things that God has forbidden me to eat, drink, or do. So discipline and you know, strengthening and sharpening that willpower is definitely a big gain of the month of Ramadan. It's also a good time to build empathy in oneself for those who are less fortunate within our community, within the sort of country that we live in, within the global community as well, and certainly giving charity, helping those who are less fortunate is highly encouraged during the month of Ramadan as well. So what is the spirit of Ramadan? Those are some of the rules of Ramadan that we have to, sort of abide by. But what's the spirit of Ramadan? Well, there are many dimensions. There is a spiritual dimension to the month of Ramadan. As I explained, it's a month where we take it upon ourselves to develop a close relationship with Allah. And as for myself at this stage in my life now, I try to cut down all the extra things around me, or extra activities, that I might do. Well, certainly I'm not going to go for coffees or lunches with friends and so on. I don't do any of those things because I physically can't do those. But even later on in the day, I try, or even during the day, I try and just restrict myself to the very necessary things I have to do. So if I have work, then obviously I set aside my energy to do that. And I also have to spend time doing, the things that I do to care for my family. But apart from that, I try and allocate time to recite extra prayers or to reflect on what my goals and aims for the month are. And I would say that possibly compared to 20 or 30 years ago, I move at a slower pace than I would have in the other months. I think Ramadan gives me the opportunity to just slow down, probably in a way that we can all identify with. We may have done during the COVID period, where we kind of suddenly put ourselves in this bubble that we had to be in, and everything just sort of slowed right down, and we were able to just sort of live in the present. And I try and do that kind of thing during Ramadan, where I just sort of just focus on the day ahead and the tasks that I have to complete. And then the rest of the time that I have, I devote myself to extra prayers. There are, reading the Quran, which was revealed in the month of Ramadan. So it has a very special significance for this month. And there are certain nights in the month of Ramadan which are called the nights of power. There are about 3 or 4 of these nights. We don't know exactly which night it was when the Quran was revealed, and we call these 3 or 4 nights the nights of power, when Allah has said in the Quran that these nights, one of these nights, is greater than 1,000 months. So any supplications or prayers that you do in these nights, it's recommended to stay awake for as much as you can, and to do as much supplication and prayer and reciting of the Quran as you can in those particular nights. They come in the sort of third half of the month. So, sort of around the 19th night to about the 23rd or 27th night. Those are the special nights. But throughout the month, there are special supplications that we recite every night. There is a special prayer that you recite when you eat the first date to open your fast. So all of these kind of things are sort of the tradition of prayer that goes with the month of Ramadan. I mentioned phases of life, and I think for me, the spirit of Ramadan, I can kind of think of it in terms of the 3 phases of my life. So when I was a child, I grew up in Dubai, in the United Arab Emirates, where, being a Muslim country, everyone was fasting during the month of Ramadan. My friends were fasting, the family. Yes, of course, I did have friends who were not Muslim at school and they didn't fast, but nobody ate in public. The restaurants were all closed during the daytime. And once the time for breaking your fast or opening your fast, which is called iftar, and it happens at sunset, once iftar time was on, then, and you would hear the call to prayer, you would hear the prayers from the mosque, the extended extra prayers being recited, the sound of the Quran being recited through the loudspeakers in the suburbs that I lived in. And after that sort of hour or so of prayer was over, then people would be free to go out and do the things that they had to do, shopping, getting, meeting with friends, going out, spending time outside, outdoors. And that's the other dimension of Ramadan. It's a very communal month. There's a very social dimension to the month of Ramadan. So in the same way that the Friday prayers is a social prayer where Muslims are told to gather together and pray on this one day with their brethren, the month of Ramadan has this very social dimension where during the day when we're fasting, hungry and thirsty, we are able to relate to the suffering of those that are hungry in the community or around the world. But we know that when we're going to open our fast, we're going to have a table of dishes. I know that I've prepared all these things. My children make a list of things that they would like to eat during the month. A lot of them are have very cultural backgrounds, and there's some of the foods are things that I only cook during Ramadan. So there's a wish list, and we try and sort of fulfill those things. But we know that we're going to have food on our tables, and that at the same time we do understand and appreciate that there are people who simply don't have access to that kind of ending to their fast. And this realization stimulates that element of charity. So it is a month of sharing and charity. And it's also this month where a lot of people go to their local mosque and often will have iftar or that evening meal together in community. So at my mosque, Imam Hassan Center in Annan Grove, we generally have iftars on Saturday nights. Being a weekend, we have the Saturday school, which runs just before iftar. And then once the school is over, when it's time for prayer, when it's sunset, we say our prayers together as a community, and then we sit down and we have this iftar together. So that's the phase that I am in now, where I'm a community leader, and I take part in organizing these the Saturday school and the prayers and the iftar at our mosque. When we can have almost 450 adults and children on a Saturday night, because our Saturday school has about 250 children. Some of those families will often leave because they may have been invited at their friends or family members' homes to break the fast, but a lot of the community will stay with their families to have iftar at the mosque, and we will have other people who often come to join us as well. So it is a very large gathering, and it can be another sort of way of exercising some of those skills that I've learned during the fast, of patience and perseverance and exercising control, because when you're working with such a large number of people, there often will be people who don't follow by the rules, or people who sort of a bit too hungry, want to have too much, or might not want to sort of follow rules or do the things that they're expected to do, and so on. It's also very difficult to plan how much food we're going to get. We kind of have an idea of the numbers of food where people were getting, but there's this element of sort of kind of expectancy and chaos sometimes, because we're trying to sort of feed a large group of people who in a very quick time frame and turnover, and then there's a big cleanup afterwards as well, obviously, when you can imagine 200 people have eaten in a hall. So looking back at my childhood, when all I had to worry about was my fast and how I got through the day, living in Dubai, it was very hot. at the time of year that I was fasting was June, July. The thing about the Islamic calendar following the lunar year is that the lunar year is 10 days shorter than the solar year. So what it means is that during over a period of 33 years, you will experience, so let me put it a different way. I arrived in Australia about 30 years ago. And when I came to Australia, it was 1994, and Ramadan was during February. And now 30 years later, we started fasting in March. So in another 3 years, it's going to move up to February. And so over the course of my 33 years in Australia, I will have fasted during all the seasons of the year and during all the solar months of the year, which means that you would, during your lifetime, you will be able to fast in the summer and the winter, the long fasts and the short fast. Unless you're a, world traveler, and you're traveling across different countries in your lifetime, as I have. So it's, when I lived in Dubai, growing up as a child, the fasts did tend to be in the longer, hotter days of summer. And I remember how my parents used to, encourage me to keep a little bit longer, to persevere without drink and food, with promises of things to come after, and how they would encourage me to sit and recite the Quran, because we have a tradition of completing the entire Quran during the month of Ramadan. So by reading the Quran is divided into chapters, 114 chapters, but it's also divided into 30 parts, so that you're able to read one part per day over a month. So a tradition is to recite one part every day, especially during the month of Ramadan. So some of the things that my parents did, I remember those. And the other thing was, we also went to the mosque. And when I was growing up, there was iftar at the mosque every night in Dubai. And that was a sort of, big community thing, where we would sort of sit together and eat all the traditional foods that I now sort of still make for my family, but on a smaller scale. And after the iftar, we would hear the special supplications that are there. That we recite during Ramadan. There would often be a lecture by a visiting scholar on some aspects of fasting or some aspects of the faith, which would sort of last about an hour, 45 minutes. So going to the mosque and, was not only social, but also a chance to learn and revive your faith, and sort of come away with some knowledge, and also be part of that tradition of listening to the supplications. And some of the supplications that I've listened to since I was a child, all these years later, I don't need a book when I hear them being recited, because I can just follow along, because I've been hearing them for so many years. And I think that, to me, was a spirit of Ramadan, hearing the sounds of the prayers, watching everyone sitting together and eating, listening to the speaker talking about the faith and so on. And then, of course, the next phase for me was when as I grew up and went to study overseas, taking the things that I had learned as a child across with me. And I studied in London, and I was living on my own, and there wasn't this community of people fasting, because my fellow hostel mates weren't fasting. And to continue that tradition, or to continue that not only the traditions, but also that aspect of my faith, was sometimes quite challenging. The fasts in England were longer than I was used to in Dubai. I had to prepare my own meals. And so sometimes, instead of eating, the traditional dates, I would just break my fast with salt, which is also a traditional way to open your fast, because I couldn't get hold of dates, or, and I would maybe have a donut instead of the traditional sort of desserts that my mother would fry, and so on. And then after that came a time when I was a parent myself. I'd moved to Australia by then, and I had to then sort of create the spirit of Ramadan for my own family. And now, as part of this mosque community, we teach the children this spirit of Ramadan. We teach them the supplications. We teach them why Allah has asked them to fast and what the benefits of fasting are for them. I think basically that's sort of covered in a nutshell. I think I've taken about 25 minutes talking, I feel, but I'm happy to answer any questions if there's anything that anyone would like to know more about, or if there's any gaps in what I've said. Yeah, feel free to ask away.
Thank you, Zora. That was concise and yet filled with stories and made it very interesting.
Thank you.
And easy for us to enter into that experience without actually getting hungry.
The bonus, yes.
All right, so if anyone would like to ask a question or reflect on something which Zora has talked about, please raise your hand using the reaction button as Jung has done. And I'm not going to miss out, so I'm going to raise my hand too. And anyone else, by raising a hand, it forms an orderly queue. Jung.
Thank you for your lecture. It was the most important lecture. I'm a Catholic myself, so I don't know much about Ramadan. What I'm asking, during the Ramadan time, politically, will police more relaxed, or police will put up their guards harder? Because look like community are under control. It looks like a curfew in Australia. I mean, just imagination. So in that time, people like soldiers, the one in the armies, the surgeon, the doctor, the doctor, the midwife, babies keep coming. Are they on a fasting? I mean, procedures, because the society still had to move on. And when people become so spiritual, will the defense force working harder, or they just put the gas down?
I'm not sure whether you mean that the defense forces in particular countries, or whether you mean that in Australia. I'm not clear about that.
Oh, just a general question. I'm just said to mention that is a general ideas. Because we just like we move around to study in a foreign countries. So in a different foreign countries, they got a different sort of the way strategy and operation of the defense of the army work in a different way. And because we carry with us our religious order, just say the Catholic order, so we have our own things to do. But I'm saying that just like in my country, in all that time when a community look like they become very spiritual, and there should be somebody guarding them, but we don't want them to be ambushed. Because I come from a military background country.
Yeah, look, I can't answer that question in a sense that I'm really not sure. As I said, I grew up in Dubai, and I certainly didn't notice any kind of tightening up or the way it was when I was growing up there was that as I've explained, there are exemptions for people during Ramadan who who might be sick, who might be elderly, who might be young children or pregnant mothers and so on. Those exemptions are there, and those are sort of part of the faith. The rules of the rules of the faith. And in Dubai, as I explained, yes, there were non-Muslims. So if they're not fasting, they are able to eat and drink within the comforts of their homes. Even within schools, for example, I think when I was at school, I do remember that for a certain period of time, I went to a Catholic school. So if there were people who weren't fasting, they were allowed to eat. If there were, children who weren't fasting, they were allowed to eat, because it's not like a military rule that if the Muslims are fasting, then everyone has to fast. It certainly wasn't that way. My mother was a teacher, and she does remember that in the staff room, some of the teachers who were non-Muslim were allowed to eat. I think what the rule was that restaurants would be closed during the fasting hours, and they were allowed to operate on either side of the fasting hours. So a lot of the time there would be this very festival spirit during the whole month of Ramadan, and restaurants would be open till very late. They are, as it is, open, till quite late. But at that particular time, they would be open till, well past midnight, and people would be out eating and drinking and so on. I'm not sure how it is now in Dubai, because I haven't been for a few years. And I think there may be a relaxation of rules, because now it is a very heavily reliant on tourists. So I don't know if those rules are how the way of the country is at the moment, and whether it is a bit more relaxed during the daytime, and maybe it is in certain areas where there are more tourists, because in certain areas where there is a majority of Muslims, the restaurants still remain closed, because no one's going to come to eat during the daytime. So I'm not really sure about that. I can't comment. Yeah, I hope that answers your question. Yeah.
Thank you.
Colin.
Yeah, thank you, Zora. Because I fast as a Baha'i, and I once went to a nutrition course by Seventh-day Adventists. They're vegetarian and wonderful cooking. You wouldn't need meat again because it's so delicious. But I asked the lecturer afterwards what he thought about fasting from sunrise to sunset, no food and water, and he said, that's very bad for you. That's terrible. Shouldn't do that. I have a feeling that he probably didn't know what he was talking about, because the world's biggest experiment has perhaps been the Islamic faith has been doing it for 1400 years all over the world, and they look pretty healthy to me. But I'm just wondering, can you tell me a bit about, do you get thirsty? Do you get hungry? And do you, any ill effects?
Yeah. Well, yes, I think there's something called intermittent fasting, which is very popular at the moment. But to answer your question, do we get hungry and thirsty? Yes. I mean, I would be lying if I said no, I didn't get hungry or thirsty. This is the first year that we've actually fasted in official summertime. So up till last year, half of Ramadan or some parts of Ramadan were during wintertime, and we had just moved across to some days being in summertime. So up till last Ramadan, the fasts were 12 hours long. We would be sort of, opening the fast after 12-hour period. But this year after a long period of time, we had 15-hour fasts. And we were all a little bit sort of concerned about how we would make it through the day. And we had some very hot days as well during end of January and during February, certainly. So we were quite concerned about that. But to be very honest with you, Colin, I think the hardest thing was not the hunger or the thirst, which I feel were sort of like, after a few days, you kind of get into this pattern of knowing that you're not eating and you're not drinking. And your body, I think, gets used to that to a certain extent. What I think is harder is the feeling of, I think for me it was just that feeling of slight physical fatigue or slowing down. I think when your body slows down, especially at the end of the day. So obviously earlier part of the day, I was able to do the tasks that I had to because I would have woken up a few hours before my normal breakfast and eaten something, and with a cup of tea and so on, like a breakfast, but just sort of a few hours earlier than I normally would have. And yes, continued sort of all the things that I had to do during that early part of the day. And then it's in the afternoon, and as the day progresses, I don't think I really felt hungry or thirsty. In fact, I was quite happy I didn't have to worry about preparing lunch or sort of do all the dishes for lunch and breakfast and all of that. It's kind of a relief, actually, not to have to put so much effort on food during the day, in a sense. Yeah, and I think if there are people who, for example, like as the days get longer and the period of time that you are without water, I know there are people who I've had friends who have, for example, kidney issues and need to drink water throughout the day. Well, for them, they're exempted from fasting because if they can't physically make it through the day without getting sick, then they're part of this group that is allowed to is exempted from fasting. And similarly, if you were on antibiotics and you had to take them 3 times a day, then you can do that. You can set aside your fasts for the days when you're on medicine. If you're physically ill and you're not able to fast, then the exemptions are there. For the rest of us who are physically able to, there is the element of hunger and thirst, but I think it's one of those things that you do sort of get used to. It's like a training ground as for anything. If you're going to do a marathon, you start by walking. Maybe you'll run for start with a few kilometers or whatever to pace yourself, and you kind of over your lifetime learn how to do this thing that that you're going to be doing. And at the end of the day, I think the important thing to remember is it's not just a fast of keeping away from food and drink, but it's also that mental fast that you're doing to make yourself a better person. And I think that is sometimes exhausting because you have to constantly pull yourself back from the thing that you're habitually falling into. So I think more than the physical fast, for me anyway. And having said that, I think as in any religion, people struggle with different aspects of their faith. And for Muslims, we have a few aspects of compulsory worship, like there's the daily prayers or the fasting during the month of Ramadan or giving charity and so on. I know that some people struggle with saying their prayers on time or regularly or sort of, so on. Some people struggle with fasting because there is a physical element to it. So I've always been fortunate in the sense that I've not struggled physically with the fast, but I know that there are people who do. And it is a training ground at the end of the day. So there are exemptions in place, and there are sort of if you're not able to physically do it, then there are ways of compensation. But yeah, I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, very good. Thank you, Zora. Vasantha.
Thank you very much, Zora, for accepting and with your busy schedule to come spend some time with us.
My pleasure.
This when you have this, if you miss few days, are you allowed to fast in another day? That's one question. Which is not during Ramadan. Is that what you do?
Yes. So there is a lot of rulings around how to compensate for missed fasts. And it depends on, the reason for missing the fast. So for example, the elderly, they're not going to be able to do their fasts. So there are different rules about how they will compensate. for young children who haven't reached the age of the fasting age, they don't have to compensate because they haven't reached the age where compulsory worship is, binds them. For a pregnant woman, she can compensate for her fasts at a later period of time, either by doing the fasts or there is also a method of payment, which is sort of like a charity, and there are rules around that. A simple rule is a menstruating woman, if she has her menstrual period during the month of Ramadan, then she can make up for the days that she misses at any time before the next Ramadan. So she's got the whole year to make up the sort of 7 to 10 days of missed fasts. So that, that is the way, for example, for that to be done. And if someone is sick again, then there are ways of sort of paying the fast over the year before the next Ramadan comes through. Yes. So there are a lot of rulings around that, but just that gives you a sort of big overview of how we compensate.
And you said you have, thank you for that. You said you have some interfaith activities at your mosque, which we have. And what sort of activities you have there? And
so we've had several interfaith activities over the years. I remember right in the beginning, one of the first few years, we have a church down the road from us, St. Madeline's, and we had an interfaith gathering just around Christmas when they had an a cappella group that came and recited Christmas carols in our mosque, and we talked about the fact that Muslims also believe in Jesus. He's a prophet for us, and the difference, the way what the Quran says about Jesus, and for example, a lot of the people who came from the church were surprised to know that there's a chapter in the Quran named after Mary. We call her Maryam in Arabic. So there's a whole chapter named Maryam, and she's the only woman who has been named and who has a chapter to her name in the Quran. And we also have a lot about Jesus and Mary in the Quran. So that was an interfaith meeting that we had many years ago, close to Christmas time. I think it was at the beginning of the Advent. Other gatherings have been around I think the sort of respecting the bounties of God and nature, and being ecological, and how our faiths encourage us to work with what we have been given, and not be wasteful, and not sort of harm the ecology and so on. So that was another gathering that we had, and so on. We've had, and during Ramadan we often invite non-Muslims. We have a night when we invite non-Muslims for iftar. I'm not sure if you've been, Vasantha, but I know that many of our interfaith friends.
Yeah, for that end of year gathering we had, I was there.
Yes, I've had an end of year gathering for all our interfaith group as well, but we've also had during Ramadan, there's one night where many of us invite our non-Muslim friends. So I've invited interfaith friends, and people bring along a neighbor or a teacher or another friend, so they can also take part in this communal iftar that we have.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so those are some of the ways that we've had interfaith programs over the years.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And the other thing, one more question, for Ramadan dinner on a Saturday. So do you cook everything there at the mosque, or you bring people bring food, or?
Yeah, that's a good question. So in the beginning, when we first began, when the mosque was first opened, which was around 2004 is when we first began. The community was fairly sort of small, I would say. We probably had about 150, 200 people, and some people did cook. We have a kitchen. We have an industrial kitchen. Well, it's not industrial, but it's equipped to cook for larger groups than a home kitchen would. And several people would come and cook at the mosque in the kitchen, and we would serve the meals out there. And we, as the community grew, and people often didn't know how to cook or didn't want to cook, and maybe it sort of coincided with the rise of catering, people who did catering, Muslims who did catering. So yes, so that's what happens now, because it's very difficult to cook for 400 to 500 people. Most people will group up with their friends, so there might be 2 or 3 different families who will commit to catering for one night, and they will hire a professional caterer who cooks off-site and then brings the food, and we basically serve the food to people. And that's generally what happens during Ramadan. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Friends, I think that mosque is owned by Laura and her husband, is that right?
Well, it was my husband's dream to build a mosque, because when he first came to Australia in the 70s, he lived in Shellharbour, which is just south of Wollongong, and there weren't many Muslims at the time, and his parents used to open their home for gatherings during Ramadan or other parts of the year when we have a lot of when we have special nights to do with the faith. And people would come from Sydney, as far as Sydney, down to their home, because there would be somebody to recite sermons and prayers and supplications and so on, and elegies and special readings. So they had a modest home back then, and it would be filled with over 100 people, and people would stay overnight if there were sort of few nights of prayers and so on, if people came from Sydney. So he had this vision that if he was ever able to afford it, when he was old enough, when he was older, and he would like to build a mosque. So yeah, I guess he was able to fulfill that dream of his. We bought the land in about 2002, I think it was, just after 2002 or 3. And yeah, here we are, 21 years. It's been 21 Ramadans. This last Ramadan was 21 Ramadan months that we've had at the mosque.
If you allow me another quick question.
Sure.
All right, but I'm going to put my hand up so I can get another go.
If Colin will let you.
Significance with the dates, or you break the fast by eating dates? What is the significance?
Well, dates have a lot of significance. I mean, they're mentioned in the Quran. There are some certain foods which are mentioned in the Quran. Dates are one of them. They are very high in energy. So when you open your fast and you need that sort of burst of energy, they are really good. And they also have a lot of minerals, and there's a very high food value for dates. And also, I suppose, traditionally in the Middle East, they were widely available. I think there's also a part of the Quran. There's a few verses in the Quran which talks about when Mary was ready to deliver the baby Jesus, and she was told to sit under the shade of a date palm and shake the tree so that she was able to eat the dates to give her the energy that she would need for childbirth. So there's a lot of significance of dates. I probably if I was prepared, I would be able to read something for you, because we always tell children about why dates are so special. Yeah.
Thank you.
Zora, when I was researching to MC this session, I found some of your writings on the internet. And,
Right.
and I read an article you read in 2019 called Of Mosques and Men.
Yes.
About the beginnings of the Imam Hussein Center in Grove. Would you be happy to tell us something about that story?
Yes, sure. So look, again, I probably won't have all the dates, accurate and so on. But as I began to explain, my husband had this vision that he wanted to build a mosque, and there was a family history in his on his father's side. His grandparents lived in East Africa, and on his father's side, they had built mosques in the suburbs that they lived in, and my husband's mother, her father was a what we would call a mullah back in the day. I suppose you could translate it to an imam or a sheikh in present day, somebody who was knowledgeable, who had studied Islam, and who was able to teach a congregation of people about the faith. So there was this sort of scholarship and I guess a history of serving community in his in his family. And I think that the whole aspect of having people at their home for the years of his childhood put this sense of serving community in him, which he continued to do. Even when I came to Australia, there was a mosque in Sydney that we used to go to, and my husband's family were quite sort of did a lot of work with regards to the faith. But anyway, my husband has a business, has an IT business, and I think when he came to a certain stage, he felt that he was able to purchase a piece of land, and I remember sometimes we would be driving through parts of Sydney that close to where we lived in, and he would say, "Oh, this looks like a very good, building and land for a mosque," and I used to think, okay, but anyway, he did find this piece of land in Annan Grove, and it's interesting that I used to drive through Annan Grove past this piece of land. In the 2000s, I used to work as a pharmacist at the St. John of God Hospital in Richmond, and I would drive past this very rural out sort of areas. And so when he said he had found this piece of land, it was sort of, quite a surprise. And of course, at the time, the Hills District, which is, where Annan Grove is a part of, was a part of Sydney called the Bible Belt. And so I think, buying the piece of land and then taking it to council for a proposal for a mosque would have seemed straightforward enough. However, there was a lot of speed bumps on the way. And one of them was the fact that the Bali bombings took place simultaneous to our proposal to council. And there was a lot of, I suppose, community fear that what had happened there would happen in Annan Grove because the Muslims were going to build a mosque. I suppose it's a lot of fear of the unknown, fear of people that you've not met before, perhaps, and so on. And there was a growing Muslim community in the hills, maybe not in Annan Grove itself as a suburb, but certainly around in the areas. It's just that the piece of land was in Annan Grove because there were larger pieces of land for sale there. So there was quite a battle to get this through. The land and the councillors, I think there were about 2 councillors out of 10 or 11 who voted for, and the rest voted against the building of the mosque. There were also thousands of letters which were sent on behalf of residents, multiple from the homes, because there aren't thousands of homes in Anangur for sure. But there was a bit of, there was a sort of a very vocal part of the community that opposed the building of the mosque, even though the local council had approved of it earlier. The town planner, sorry, had approved. So we had to end up going to the Land and Environment Court, and we were able to get through that with a positive result. And so in many ways, this was a landmark case, so we did begin building. My husband, having grown up in Australia, spent most of his life here. I think he was 7 when he came, and he's as Aussie as they come, I think, in a lot of ways. He loves cricket. He loves, he had the quintessential childhood, riding on his bike in the sort of country areas, playing cricket with his mates, and doing all the things that Aussie kids do, I think. So he had this vision that the mosque was going to not look like the mosques that I had seen growing up in my childhood, with the minarets and the domes and, this sort of these things, that these ideas that we hold in our head. No, his mosque was going to look very different, and it had to fit in as well. There were certain regulations that we were given that the mosque had to comply with, in terms of the building, the colors, the vegetation that was, or what was grown on site, and so on. So, those were some of the things that were there. And often after it was built and ready, and we were there already, people would drive past, and my friends would say, "Oh, where is your mosque?" And I would say, "Oh, it's this, it's the building that's between the local sports field and the petrol station." They would say, "That looked like an RSL. It didn't look like a mosque." And I would say, "Well, that's partly the way we were, asked to build. That was the requirements." And also, my husband was not going to have minarets. He was not going to have a dome. The Kaaba, for example, is a pyramid, a square, and the mosques in the time of the Prophet's day were also like flat roofed. A lot of the architecture that you see in mosques is now a sort of development along the various, I guess, the empires that came along after the Prophet. So yes, once building started, we did have another hiccup. One morning, my husband woke up. I think it wasn't a weekend, it was a weekday, but the builder, who happened to be a Lebanese Christian builder, and the architect was his brother, who had designed the mosque. But anyway, the builder, George, rang my husband, and he said, "Look, don't come over this morning. We've had an issue." And my husband, and he said, "We've called the police," because the builders went into the grounds, "and we've called the police." And I sort of said, "What's happened?" And my husband said that there had been pigs' heads impaled on the fence, on stakes, and people had gone inside and thrown blood inside the building, pigs' bloods inside the building, as well as various other sort of body parts, I think I would put it as, just to sort of anyway. So my husband, of course, didn't listen to that. He went straight along, and luckily for him, a lot of the cleaning had begun. The police were also there, and they were very sort of protective. And I think possibly what the perpetrators had thought was, now the pigs have been there in the mosque, it's not going to go on. but my husband explained that, yes, Muslims don't eat pigs. The meat of pigs is not considered clean for us to consume, but there are ways of cleaning the blood from the building and purifying the building, and we will continue as normal. So it was just a little hiccup. And after that, of course, we had to increase the security. We had a guard dog on site, and we had put proper fencing around, and the dog was let out every night. And in the morning, somebody would come and deal with the guard dog and so on. And we had to really up the security. But that process of building and dealing with those things, and that was an incident that was sort of probably a memorable one, because it stood out because it was quite a shocking one. But there was community support for us in terms of people just dropping by while the building would be going, while the builders were there, and there were all a huge group of Lebanese, Christian, and Muslim builders who would come to do the building, to do the work. People would walk in with, gifts of a plant or an olive tree, or just come look around and say, we've never been to a mosque before. Can we have a look around and see what's happening, what you're doing here? And my husband would sort of, we live next door, we live down the road, and that sort of thing. So there was this kind of gentle interest in what was happening, because it was something that was new, and there were people who were supportive. And I would like to say that, as I mentioned, that it's been 21 years, and after those initial roadblocks, we have had a very smooth and happy time there. We're very much a sort of part of the community now. No one thinks twice about the mosque being there. On Saturdays we have our Saturday school. We've got the sports field with cricket going on, or soccer, and the shops welcome us. There's actually even a halal food truck now outside the petrol station, and people are very happy to go there and buy kebabs and things like that. So I think that we have truly become a part of the community that is just there, and no one really kind of bats an eyelid. And I can also say that I don't have the figures, but I know the last time I checked, that figure that made the hills, the district, the Bible Belt, the number of people who now identify in certain religious categories has decreased because of the state of faith in Australia. Those percentages have certainly changed, and also the number of Muslims in the surrounding areas has just shot, because we've had so many migrants coming in and settling in to all the surrounding areas around in the hills. So the local community has certainly grown. The local Muslim presence has grown as well.
Thank you, Zora. I love to hear that story, because I remember the publicity at the time, the negative publicity, and I was thinking, well, that's not fair, because I know Islam from its very beginnings has protected other religions, and it just seems unfair that prejudice could happen when you're trying to build a place of prayer.
Yeah.
And I was wondering how you changed, how the demographics changed, so that you now have such a successful community in that area, and you explained it was the change. Where, I mean, it used to be called the Bible Belt. I'm not sure if it is now, because the church isn't, the particular church there isn't quite so successful.
Look, it is. I think the numbers, when I last looked, when I was writing something, yes, it's quite interesting how the demographics have changed, but I think the church down the road, St. Madeline's, has always had a very good relationship with us. And actually, I was actually going to mention when Basanta asked about interfaith events. I remember one year we had a visiting scholar from overseas, from Birmingham, and he runs a school of Islamic studies, which is affiliated with one of the universities in England as well. So he was visiting here, and St. Madeline's was having the groundbreaking for their new building, and they invited our scholar to come for the groundbreaking ceremony. So we represented, we were there, and we've had an exchange of visits in that vein over the years with St. Madeline's, and had good relationships with their with the priests who've been there over the years. So yes, and I think that the sort of areas which are sort of north and I would guess sort of east of Annan Grove, the number of Muslims has grown so much now that where in the past we would have smaller gatherings on Eid on the first day of the new month after Ramadan, where we have special prayers. We now have even more. We have to do multiple services during the day so that we can accommodate all the people who want to come for the prayers. Yeah.
Wonderful. All right, we're coming to the end of our time, but we're still here. Zora's still with us, so if anybody has any questions,
Zora,
please,
is it
now's
okay?
your chance.
Just so there is a mullah or a priest there, or who conducts the service at your mosque? It's your husband?
Oh no, my husband, he probably would like to read sermons. He often lectures us at home, but he's not a priest by any means. He hasn't studied enough, though he does have a lot of knowledge through through his mother and through reading and so on, and he has given lectures in the past. But over the years, we've had resident sheikhs or leaders or imams, and some of them have come from overseas. Some of them have been from Pakistan or England. At the moment, our resident sheikh is a young family man who's actually pathologist, not a pathologist. I'm not sure what the exact term is, but he works in a pathology lab. Is it a pathology lab? I'm getting it wrong. Yeah, I think he's a radiologist. So he works in he's got a day job, and this is something that he does on Fridays. He gives the Friday lecture and conducts the Friday prayers, and on Saturdays he comes and teaches at our Saturday school. When we have our adult lectures, he delivers those. And one of the things that I didn't mention earlier was that my husband grew up in Australia, and he grew up speaking only English. So he was very keen that when he was going to have this mosque, that everything would be in English so that he and his children could understand what was being said. Because when he was growing up, often visiting scholars would come from South Asia or South Asia, and a lot of them spoke in a language that he couldn't understand. He hadn't learnt. So he really was very keen on having that our mosque would have predominantly English lectures. So we do have lectures in other languages. We obviously recite the Quran in Arabic. We have prayers in Arabic. We have other supplications and religious songs or so on in other languages. But there is always an English lecture so that children or people who don't understand other languages, cultural languages, can understand what's going on. So he was very big on that. So So currently our resident scholar delivers all his lectures in English. He often has a PowerPoint that he plays and uses to, to deliver the lectures.
Zora, if Jung and I wanted to visit the mosque sometime, what's the best time? Is it open for visitors at any particular time?
Yes, look, it is. We do have, from time to time, we have groups of visitors who express an interest in coming. And I think what we could do is possibly invite you to come maybe on a Friday when we have Friday prayers. We have 2 sermons which are both in English, and after that there is the communal prayer. So that might be a good time if you wanted to sort of come in and observe and listen to the lectures. But maybe we can sort of maybe you can let me know when you're interested in coming, and I can sort of also see when there would be a suitable time to have you visit us. Certainly.
Lovely. That's something I'd like to do. There might be others in Sydney or in travelling distance as well.
We would like to ask if you are interested to go with your children and your husband, go to the Baha'i temple to have a look at.
Yeah, she came. She already came. So she
Yeah.
was
At the moment, the Baha'i temple not open. Is that right?
No, it
Not
is
open.
It's open. It's open, and she visited with her mom there to the Baha'i temple. And
Yeah, but she should bring all her Muslim friends and try to get them into the spirit of Baha'i spirits.
yes.
Oh, well, that's thank you for the suggestion, Jung. And of course that
Baha'i spirit.
and yeah, exactly. The Baha'i temple's open. Jung's Catholic Church is very welcoming, and I think in interfaith that's a wonderful thing that we can have our places open to each other.
Yeah, it's better to convert them too,
No, I don't think so. But thank you for the idea.
Try to convert them. And if we have to go to any other worship place, we should bring our own guards. We should get some policemen follow me.
All right. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jung. And
Tracy also like it to visit it. We can organize a day to go, Tracy, to the mosque.
thank you,
It's a bit far. She's near Newcastle.
All right. Look, can I just thank
No, I'm talking about military academy here.
All right.
Before we close, Zora, we'd like to invite your husband also one day to give us a presentation.
Yeah. I will let him know.
Yes,
Thursday nights are often he's actually gone to the mosque tonight because we have a special supplication that we recite on a Thursday evening. Friday is the day of the Muslim sort of holy day for prayers and so on, but Thursday night is the night before Friday, so there is a special supplication. And many Thursdays he often goes because tonight we have a visiting guest from overseas who is going to be reciting, who is an expert in reciting the Quran in a beautiful melodious way. So there's a special program tonight, but I'm sure maybe we can find a night when he's able to join the gathering. Yeah.
No, really, I appreciate your presence today. Thank you.
You have any lunch? You have any lunch services at all, like at lunch? Like time?
If you are going, you can organize. We will organize.
No, because if we get some guests to go follow us, then they probably prefer to visit your place at a daytime.
All right. Thank you, Jung. Look, we appreciated your talk today, Zora. It was very interesting and very helpful for interfaith.
Thank you for having me. Thanks for Santa for inviting me.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you again, Zora.